All set.
All good. Thank you so much. Okay. Can we go? All right. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I cannot see who is on Zoom, but I'm hoping Whitney and David are still there, as they are our presenters. We have 3 people in the room, plus Cindy and myself, and Trish from RDC, who is helping with the monitoring the chat, I think, and having an overall look over things. We're running a bit late. Apologies for that. And I know Limo needs to go early. So let's get started. Welcome to the Birds of a Feather session on agricultural research data integrity. I think everyone here probably knows the 6 guiding principles of the RDA. And this is the agenda for the session. Thank you. So I'll just do a really brief welcome and introductions. Then we'll have a problem statement from Whitney, who's online. And then we have a couple of lightning talks. Yes, it just occurred to me, we have a recorded video that we need to play. Hardcore. Okay, we'll see how we go with that. And then I might actually skip a bit about international data spaces because we're starting 15 minutes late. We can do that later if we do have time. And Cynthia will be talking about the agricultural community of practice within the RDA. And we hopefully have a bit of time for Q&A and discussion. Okay, so we have a collaborative notes document. We invite you to put your name down. The TLE link will appear on a couple of further slides, but if you want to scan the QR code and put your name in, that would be great. Feel free to add any notes that you see fit. So in terms of who do we have Cynthia, and I think I can hand the microphone around to people if you like. So in the room, we have Cynthia and myself, Stephanie Ketas from RDC. Online, we have David and Whitney, and I'll ask you to introduce yourselves, I think, at the start of your talks. That might be easiest. Is everyone happy if I just hand the microphone around the room to just see who we have here? Yep. Okay. Can we start with you, Ryan? Yep.
So, hi everybody. So my name is Ryan O'Connor. So I work with RDA Europe. Mainly, well, all of my attention is on the RDA Tiger project, and I'm mainly in this room today because I'm one of the groups I'm supporting with RDA Tiger is the Ethics in Agricultural Data Working Group. So I just wanted to kind of be here. So the co-chairs of that group aren't here at the moment. I'm not sure if they're online actually, but I don't think so. But I just wanted to be here as a kind of representative of that group, but just with the proviso that I don't have any expertise in the background of agricultural data, but happy to make the connection, the personal connection, if anything.
That would be great, Ryan. Thank you very much. I'll just hand over to Trish.
Thanks, Stephanie. Trish Raditich. I'm the RDA Regional Community Manager for Oceania and East Asia. So my role with the ARDC is really to bring awareness of RDA in the region. Ag data is obviously one of the big things producers in Australia, so I think it'll be quite relevant for us to kind of champion this and for me to learn as much as possible. But practically, I'm here to help the technical team and back up. So thank you.
Thank you, Trish. And let's just go over here. Okay, yeah, cool.
Hello, my name is Anne-Sophie Bage from France. I work at National Research Institute for Agriculture, Food and the Environment. And
We lost you.
Yep.
Things happen, I guess.
Oh, they lost the projector.
Oh no.
It was wise of Cindy to join on her iPad.
Looking forward to February.
Me too. I I will, it has been a little bit of a quest for the last 30 days. So I'm just excited to keep it, like to officially open it up.
I imagine.
So, yeah.
Just thinking about maybe hanging around DC a little bit before and after. Um, Go see headquarters, got some people to talk to over there.
Definitely.
Johns
There's also
Hopkins.
a part of USDA has an annual meeting the later part of the week in Arlington.
I'm unaware, but I'll look into it.
Yeah, Andrew had messaged me. Um, maybe. Is it the Agricultural Outlook Forum?
Yeah, I'd go to that.
There you
I have a
go.
tendency to like just sort of combine things while I'm traveling. I probably don't even need to like, yeah, that'd be an easy lift to go to a USDA sponsored thing.
I mean, you're out there, they should be
Yeah.
pushing it through. And it's, yeah, it's just over at the Crystal City Gateway. So that one connects, it has the metro through it and the airport is right there.
Oh, that's
DCA.
easy.
Yeah,
I haven't decided which airports I want to fly in and out of.
it's a
Baltimore's
quest.
technically closer. The transit from the DC airports is a little bit easier, weirdly, just because of the like how it's located. From what I can tell on Google Maps, I don't really know.
It, Laurel is not super easy to get to by public transportation.
I'll have to do
Um,
an Uber
yeah,
in and out then.
yeah, the logistics of me supporting it is just, I was trying to do like a carpool thing and it was a bridge too far.
Yeah, I'm not about to. I've spent the last so many years, first in Indiana, Hawaii, Texas, in the middle of nowhere, and Kansas. I I think I've lost my ability to drive in large cities.
That's okay. Laurel's a lot more like Kansas.
Oh, good. Good. Maybe I
Yeah,
will rent the car then. We'll see.
yeah. It's very purposefully in the middle of farmland in Maryland.
Oh, I really want to go to this session on crop insurance.
Hmm.
I know that sounds like an odd thing for me to want to go to, but one of our problems is we don't understand the economic impact of the work that we do, like
Hmm.
specifically arthropod-borne diseases. And one of the thoughts is that we should be talking to insurance adjusters and risk managers.
Oh, yes. Um, let's see what I can do. We cannot hear you, but yes, I can be prepared to present.
So my name is Limor Peer. I am from Yale University. I'm interested in data integrity. I don't know much about or anything really about agricultural data, but the topic in general is of interest.
Thanks, that's great. I haven't introduced myself. My name is Stephanie Ketas. I'm with the Australian Research Data Commons. I'm also more interested in data integrity than in agricultural, although I look after a portfolio of projects in food security, and a couple of those have a strong agricultural component. So I sort of get a little bit of information on it. And one of the use cases is actually from one of my projects, though that's a pre-recorded video. So we'll see how we go with that. Okay. Aims of the session are to introduce the topic, because I think while there are a lot of agricultural data groups, I don't think this particular topic has been flagged greatly. We want to gauge interest in setting up an interest or working group within RDA on this topic. And we, of course, are interested in recruiting interested members and making connections with other groups within RDA. Okay, now this is going to be interesting. Whitney, can we hand over to you to introduce yourself and do the problem statement, please?
Sure, of course. Hi, everybody. I am Whitney Zatzkin. Very quickly, I just want to confirm, Stephanie, that you can hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. You guys, we're going to get through it, guys. All right, I am Whitney Zatzkin. I am the co-founder and director of a nonprofit international organization called the Bioeconomy Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We focus on cybersecurity, biosecurity, biodefense, and all of the layers in between for everything in the bioeconomy. So it's clearly a very large ecosystem and industry and space. And while we were working through a few cybersecurity incidents this year, we also identified a need for a conversation around data integrity. And so that's what I'm here to present. Stephanie, I think you need to advance the slides. So next slide. Thank you for your support. So the hypothesis question came forward. If hackers are able to get into a piece of equipment in your lab, what happens to the data? And how is quality control put into place around your public data sets that are available for work in the open science initiatives and collaboration globally? What criterion for trustworthiness is met either through the people sharing the data or within the data itself? Who is pushing the button and uploading those data sets to your systems? What does it look like? And from where we sit, the conversation around data integrity has to do with the accuracy and whether or not those data points are telling you exactly what you think they're telling you. Are they free from contamination? Is there some sort of rigor or I often talk about the fingerprint. Are we able to look at a data set and see its lineage from when it was created, what piece of equipment it was created on, and on and on. Next slide. There we go. So we invented a little bit of a meme that we're calling Nick. And it came out of a dialogue about one of the leading global data sets that is available to the public, as long as you submit a quick email over to the National Institutes of Health here in DC. It's a very highly regarded data set. It is genomic data. And we started sort of muttering over some coffee one morning, and we were like, well, who actually uploads the data? And somebody in the conversation said, oh, I know that guy. I think his name is Nick. And we were like, well, who the heck is Nick? and what's going on? And so we really dug into this idea of one person and what is that one person looking at. And so Nick is the guy pushing the button, uploading the data, and growing a data set so that it is more attractive to researchers internationally. Nick is authorizing data additions. Nick is authorizing the downloads and who gets to participate in the Research Commons. What we're not clear on is there acceptance criteria? When we chatted with a handful of folks at the helm of a lot of the world's genomic data sets, they went to LinkedIn to see if the person had a LinkedIn profile that said the same job as the email address that they sent. And here in the US, we have a very widely publicized case of a University of Florida student that was able to order some dual use biologic elements by changing her email signature to say that she was in a biology program instead of what she was doing. So the other questions that came about, would Nick be able to tell if something was in the data? Would a researcher in academia be able to tell if something was contaminating the data or shifting the results in some sort of computized way? And so it is funny to think about Nick, but it's also kind of scary when you start to think orders of magnitude and what an AI model might be extracting from a data set that may not be clean to begin with. Next slide. And so as we dug into this and we started to look about what constructs could help in this area, one of our colleagues shared that in one analysis, it's actually above 10,000 peer-reviewed articles and publications were removed because of issues with the integrity of the data. And it became this really interesting dialogue around accuracy and performance and lineage and treating that as the noble but very nerdy required activity at the backbone of all of our science. Right now, our ability to generate new data in agriculture all the way through is outpacing our ability to make sure that that data is free from manipulation and sound. And so we're all doing a really good job working with trusted friends and partners, but that also means that we may have a blind spot to something that might happen to manipulate the markets. And so that's where my organization comes in. We convene folks across all of these conversations, and we negotiate and represent those conversations in government. We are convening a group. We only had this meeting and created this proposed standard about 6 months ago. We're working with everybody from the FBI labs all the way through to several other government partners and beyond. And our hope is that we can continue to expand it. So if you're interested in joining this effort and conversation, help at isaac.bio, or of course, you're welcome to email me directly, whitney@isaac.bio. Would absolutely love and welcome your insights and expertise, especially if you are sensitive to analyzing your own data sets and making sure that they're safe and sound. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Stephanie. Thank you all.
Thanks, Whitney. Any comments or questions? Yeah, okay, good. Let's do that. So let's move forward to David. Can we get you to talk, please? And to introduce yourself first and then go through your slides.
Sure. Yeah. My name is David Mollick. I'm a computational biologist and principal investigator for the United States Department of Agriculture Agricultural Research Service. And I work for a unit called the Arthropod-Borne Animal Disease Research Unit, which principally looks at how insect vectors are spreading disease in animal populations. And that's a biosecurity. Do I have like a next slide? And I don't know if my slides got in, but I can just continue. Yeah, there you go. That's me. And which falls under the idea, or falls under a very physical idea of biosecurity and biodefense, and not so much a computational. Although as a computational biologist, I've sort of my thought processes and around biosecurity and biodefense within the context of agriculture have increased over time. Next slide. And so I have a tendency to think in terms of solutions. I see a problem in biosecurity, and how can we start to solve those problems, or in data integrity in this sense. Um, so one of the things I've thought a lot about is how either copying or sharing data can introduce the possibility of error. By which I mean I have a data set that I've downloaded from some repository, and I might, in the course of my science, modify that data set slightly, even to the, going in and editing the file, and then having that file shared from system to system to system over a period of time without re-referencing the original or the originating data set. And so we developed, or during my postdoc, I started thinking about with Ontario Institute for Cancer Research and ATCC and a few others, thinking about how can we add, metadata and provenance data in particular to um, to the data that we're looking at, so that we can be more assured that the data that we are looking at is in fact what it's supposed to be. And so I present this sort of as a one way that you could, in a sense, non-computationally solve this problem. Of course, you can also institute things like checksums or other algorithmic controls to ensure that data is the same thing that you were looking at. So this, in particular, we were interested in reference genomes, or that's where we started to look, developed a tool called the FAIR Bioheaders reference, which is a way to add metadata to reference genomes, FASTA files, which um, ensures a chain of information to the reference genome so that it can be preserved. Yeah, I think I'll end it there. I'm interested in where this conversation goes, so I don't want to take up too much time.
Okay, thanks, David. Okay, now, technically, we have a video to play. I'm not quite sure how that is going to work because, of course, at the moment, I'm not connected with audio. And playing a video. It's in the folder. It's in the folder. But you would have to play it. So I would have to stop sharing and you share. Is that okay? Okay, good. I've stopped sharing, obviously. So it should be in the folder for this session.
Are in Zoom right now.
Yes.
There. And show me the folder.
It's the one that we were, okay. No, that's not it. That one. So I don't know if you can see that.
But I need to set up the audio here. RDA here, the audio.
Yeah.
Yeah. But
Yeah. And then I share it?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see how that goes. Actually, hang on.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm from the University of Melbourne.
That doesn't help because it's not in Zoom, right?
Oh, we can see it.
Is it? Okay, now the problem is that won't share the audio. Okay, shall we try and see if
Senior Research Fellow in the School of Mathematics and Statistics.
Can you hear the audio on Zoom?
Nope.
Yep.
And I'm affiliated with the Melbourne Centre for Data Science and the Centre of Excellence for Biosecurity Risk Analysis. I'm joining today to talk to you about this project that I lead, titled Enhancing Models for Rapid Decision Support in Emergency Animal Disease Outbreaks, and to talk about how agricultural data integrity fits into this work. So this is a project that is...
Sorry. Stupid touchpad. So what do we have now? Okay, so what do we need to do now? Try that again.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm from the University of Melbourne, and I'm a Senior Research Fellow in the School of Mathematics and Statistics. And I'm affiliated with the Melbourne Centre for Data Science and the Centre of Excellence for Biosecurity Risk Analysis. I'm joining today to talk to you about this project that I lead, titled Enhancing Models for Rapid Decision Support in Emergency Animal Disease Outbreaks, and to talk about how agricultural data integrity fits into this work. So this is a project that is co-designed with the University of Melbourne, CSIRO, the Department of Agriculture, Fisheries and Forestry, and also, of course, Australian Research Data Commons. So before we get into what response means in this case, we do need to start with what an emergency animal disease outbreak is and what that means for Australia. So I've got up on the screen 3 examples of emergency animal diseases: foot and mouth disease, avian influenza, and lumpy skin disease. So these are just 3 of 66 nationally listed diseases that would, which detection of any of these would cause an immediate response. And each of these have really significant impacts on our agricultural industries. So one of the most recent examples of an outbreak in Australia is with high pathogenicity avian influenza. There were outbreaks concurrent across multiple states within Australia, states and territories, Victoria, New South Wales, and the Australian Capital Territory. And up on the screen, I've got a map that was released by New South Wales during that time, which is of some of the declared areas. And these are one of the main decisions that people can make to help, or the government can make to help control spread of disease. So there's 2 declared areas here. The outer orange one denotes an area of movement restrictions, while the inner red one has some much more stringent interventions, and these are around specifically detected properties with avian influenza. And within these, there's much harsher restrictions, which include culling of infected premises. And so these are, for the people involved, these are really sort of devastating impacts. So this doesn't seem like the sort of decision where we could improve the way that we're bringing data into it. And we're sort of developing modeling workflows at a few different levels of complexity, and I'm just going to briefly show you some outputs from the most simple one. So for this, we need 2 basic types of data. There's infected premises data, so which farms or poultry farms have been infected, and then also susceptible premises data, so which locations on a map are susceptible to avian influenza or whichever disease it is at the time. And using this sort of time series of infected premises data and combining that with where the disease could be spreading, we can then we have developed a mapping framework. We can estimate the spatial spread, but from one infected property, so how far away from the property would be most likely to be infected in the future. And then by looking at which properties do get infected and how far they are away through time, we can get a good understanding of that and then flow that through this workflow to then develop visualizations of spatial risk maps, which we could then be used to help inform these declared areas. And these are just a few different plots that we made from, because of the general nature of this type of workflow, we can apply this to different diseases. So here's some outputs if we look at the data from the foot and mouth disease outbreak from 2001 in the United Kingdom. So given the nature of these diseases and how important it is that, or how much we are relying on these data sets, it's clear that if there's errors in those data sets or things aren't right, that could lead to some quite devastating decisions. So that's just really a glimpse of the project that we're doing. I want to say thank you to Stephanie for organizing the session, and I hope all is going well.
Okay. Okay, station, that's good. I just run through this, I think. No, yeah. So Chris also provided me 2 slides, and basically just to illustrate some of the data challenges they're facing. So one is around property identification codes, and that's basically in NSW is New South Wales, so that's an Australian state. A property identification code is a code to properties with livestock, and that's in a district register. And these registers hold information to identify the land, which includes property names, locations, and some more information about the actual trading entity. And one of the issues there is that this doesn't get updated very quickly. And that means that the information may just not be up to date or maybe incomplete. So that's an issue in this situation when you're trying to actually identify properties correctly. And the other one is around data sharing in many cases. So Australia has what's called the National Livestock Identification System, or NLIS. And that is basically a system to identify and trace cattle, sheep, and goats. But so that's a big thing. And I think that was introduced with a bit of pushback from the farmers and people, but it's there, it's mandatory. But for one thing, for example, if you move cattle from one state to the other, then the originating state knows where the cattle came from and the target state knows where the cattle goes to, but they don't share that information. So each state only has half of the picture. So that's not really very useful. And also not all types of animals are actually covered. So for example, if you have backyard chickens, as many people do, they wouldn't be registered either. So again, depending on what kind of animal disease outbreak you're looking at, that's a bit of a problem. Okay, we did have some slides from Carmen, but she didn't really provide much context with them. So what I was going to do was not talk to them because I'm pretty sure I'm just going to mess it up, but just very briefly mention that these slides are in the slide deck, which if it's not in the collaborative notes yet will be there. And it at least has a little bit of information about her project. So it's about a European knowledge platform for multidimensional animal welfare assessment on farm, during transport, and at the abattoir. There's a QR code there, so you can find a bit of information on it. The whole project objective is to develop a knowledge platform with the objective to collect, analyze, share, and use integrated data on animal welfare. And the data challenges she's listed are the lack of harmonization for the animal welfare data collection in the European Union. So data schemes, formats, parameters, data access, and storage between others, which sounds very much like the problems we have in Australia between the states. So each state has their own standards and their own rules and their own terminologies, etc. So that's a bit of an issue. So that sounds quite similar. And yeah, I actually cannot really talk about that one because I don't know enough about the project, but there's a QR code, and Carmen also provided contact details. So if you're interested in more information, she'd be presumably happy to provide that. She's been unwell for a while, so that's why she hasn't been able to join us here, unfortunately. Oops, no, we're not doing that. So I'm not going to talk about data spaces because we're actually running a bit all over the place. So I'll hand over to Cynthia to talk about the agricultural community of practice.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cindy Parr. I am based at the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where I am a chief data officer with responsibilities to the mission area in USDA that does research. So we actually have 4 research agencies. One of them is the Agricultural Research Service. That's the one that David is a scientist in. We also have 2 statistical data services, which do things like survey farmers and get a lot of economic data and do economic analyses. And then we have an agency that gives money to university researchers and extension services so that they can do all kinds of agricultural research. So it's a pretty broad remit. And my duties involve both research, data, policy, and management, where primarily I work with my home organization, the National Ag Library. I've got a relationship with the Ag Data Commons, which is USDA's research commons, basically a place where we can publish research data. But I also have a lot of responsibility on the operational data side and implementing the US Evidence Act, which involves making sure that we have good evidence to base our decisions on. And those can be everything from making sure that our workforce development is meeting goals to facilities management, and also biosecurity and the bioeconomy. So actually I'm pulled into some of these issues as part of my role. But what I'm here to talk about today is my role as the one of 4 co-chairs for the Improving Global Agricultural Data Community of Practice, which began in RDA very early, I think. The first plenary we started. Yeah, I was not there at that time, but it was an interest group and it's kept going strong since then. And a few years ago, we transitioned to be RDA's first community of practice. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means and what I think we can do to help facilitate this group. So I've just got a slide up here to show my co-chairs, some of the achievements, the working groups that we've helped put forward, and I'll say a little bit about the Ethics in Agricultural Data Working Group that Ryan mentioned as he introduced himself. But basically, EGAD is now the focal point for food and agricultural sciences within RDA. What that means for the ag data community is that we can help make sure that we're aligned globally on our best practices about data. We have networking, so we can form partnerships and maybe even get funding to do projects together. And hopefully we'll have a better ability to impact our stakeholders and essentially learn from each other. So it's a community of practice. We're a network of people that facilitates each other's work. From the RDA perspective, hopefully we can help minimize the work of the TAB by using our expertise at getting working groups off and running. We can also use our network to attract new members to RDA that may not have known that RDA existed. And I'll talk about how that works in a second. And particularly because we have a lot of membership in parts of the world that don't usually have the resources to come to RDA meetings. And then finally, we have hopefully the ability to promote adoption of RDA outputs in our various communities. And the way this works, and I've got a diagram here that's a little old, but in the center is the community of practice of this, this little flower diagram. And around the outside, these colored circles are essentially different networks of agricultural practitioners, researchers that don't necessarily all need to be part of RDA. But we have a liaisons group with representatives from those networks who are essentially our means of communication with these outside networks. They can attract people to join us where it's appropriate, but they can also help get the word out to those networks if they don't need to actually be here. And then around the center here are a number of working groups or interest groups that have overlapping interests with agriculture or are under our umbrella. So they're distinctly about agriculture. So this is slightly old. I'm not sure all of these people are still in our liaisons group, but we have hoped that this mechanism will help us better promote RDA work and also importantly to bring use cases from the agricultural world to the RDA working groups where they could use them. So even if the working group is not specifically about ag, there's a reason where we could get people out there in the world to give us examples of how it would be useful to ag. Okay, so just a couple examples of the kinds of things we do in 2020 23, we held our third annual meeting, which was essentially 2 weeks worth of webinars that we organized from people around the world. That was fully virtual. It was not in association with an RDA conference. And it focused primarily on some collaborations we have in Eastern Europe and also farm data from around the world. So we had speakers from Africa and China, as well as Europe and the Americas. We also organized a meet and greet, and there's a recording link, and that is where we invited the chairs of various working groups outside of agriculture to come and give us some idea of what their work is, hoping to share that with our agricultural networks. The big thing that we've been focusing on the last few years has been a World Fair project. This is a European Union project, funded project that involved collaborators from around the world to work on plant pollinator data standards and think about how the data of this nature can be made more fair. And so that was a huge amount of work. My colleague, Deborah Drucker from Brazil, was a PI on that project, but it was part of a larger project with many other domains of data. And so there's a lot of great outputs from that. And that work is still, although it's concluded, the implications of that work are going to continue as we work on it. Our newest effort is this working group on ethics in agricultural data. And my colleague Alan Moss has been helping to facilitate this, but they did successfully get a Tiger Award, so they have Ryan now to help with logistics, which is fantastic. But they are looking for more members from around the world, so please tell your colleagues if this doesn't describe your interests. We hope that you'll find others to join us. And it's essentially to try to come up with RDA endorsed recommendations on how to do this work ethically, whether you're an institution wanting to do good work, whether you're a researcher who wants to implement standards ethically, or even if you're on the ground as a producer or farmer who are the subjects of data. You're actually part of the data collection, or you want to use the data. So I think that's all I'm going to say about that. And that's it for me. But I guess basically I'm here to see what I can do to bring our community together with this working group to see if we can help out. And honestly, from my own day job, I think this is going to be really fantastic for my day-to-day work as well.
Thanks so much, Cindy. That was great. So we have a bit of time for questions and discussion. So first of all, are there any questions on any of the short talks we've had? I actually had a question for you, Cindy. So the liaisons group, do you actually have liaisons like based on region, or how does it work?
So it's actually, each is representing a network. Some of those networks are regional, but not all of them are. And we're sort of, because we were so focused on World Fair, we haven't done as much with the liaisons as perhaps we could. And so we're hoping to get that jump started again soon. And I didn't have the list of organizations, but it includes things like OGC, you know, for geospatial data, but it also includes more regional specific networks as well. And so actually that's the other thing. If you have networks that you know of that would be good partners for us, we'd love to have them join us.
So yeah, I was thinking, and also with the ethics in agriculture data, I think you had Gabby Seregra from the National Farmers Federation in Australia talk about the farm data code that they developed. And I was thinking they might be a good sort of network to tap into if we can get them interested. So anyway, that's a bit by the by. Any questions otherwise on what's been said? Or any comments? Limo, you look like you wanted to say something?
Sorry, it's maybe a little bit of a tangential aspect, but the communities of practice. You said you're the first one. Are there others? There are others since, okay. And how, and how, is it loosely organized? Is there a schedule? How does it work?
So I think in our case, we were kind of already operating as a community of practice, and then RDA developed a process to basically formalize that. And it does require a roadmap, which we just reported on last month. I don't know that we completed everything in our roadmap. So you need to have a plan, but it is more than an interest group. I mean, because our interests are so broad, it does make sense that we're a community. We're not just, ag data is all over the place. And earth and environmental sciences also, I guess, has gone through the process. And of course, we have a lot of collaboration with overlap with earth and environmental data as well. So
if you're interested in that, Trish can probably put something in the notes. But there are documents describing what you need to do to become a community of practice. We wrote them. So. Right? Yeah.
Hi, so yeah, just on that issue of the communities of practice, just with the example you were given there about the IGAD one, you mentioned about the kind of that flower diagram about engaging so the different communities or just different kind of aspects of the agricultural world with different communities who wouldn't necessarily be that close to the kind of data management side of things. And you were talking about the kind of possibly developing sort of use cases of the impacts that the like things developed within RDA or even similar sort of organizations would have in those communities. But what sense do you get? Because I'm always going to think is it a bit that sort of relationship might be a bit sort of too one way. So in what sense would you get, like, maybe I'm just from a total sort of layman's perspective, engaging, for example, things like producers or farmers groups with kind of having a say in those types of recommendations that might be impactful on their work. And I guess that's kind of very broadly within the remit of a group, a community of practice like that, but much more difficult to actually do in practice maybe. So yeah, it's not much of a question, it's more just a statement.
no, and I should say that's our aspiration, is to have a very robust two-way communication, and working with producers is the hardest one because they're not going to come to meetings like this one. So our hope is, and maybe this particular working group can help in that, if our networks have connections with their own stakeholders, they can then talk to the stakeholders and bring back their use cases. So rather than try to invite people to a meeting like this where it's just not going to be worth their time to try to understand the Research Data Alliance. But if somebody and I'm going to try to direct our conversation back to the data integrity question. Let's say there's a company out there that wants to use genomic data to develop a vaccine against some of these emerging wildlife diseases. The researchers in that space have some ability to communicate with those small companies and can ask them and help them develop a use case statement that then we could bring back and work on here at RDA. So I don't know if that's, Whitney is actually in a great position, I think, with her organization to do that kind of fact finding, and then also on the other end to adopt the recommendations once they come out. And I will say that for the community of practice, the hardest part of reporting on our activities was we just don't have capacity to track down the impact. And so, maybe that's something else the Tiger support can help us provide, because I don't have time to go check on all the views on all our videos, or even, I know we have about 300 members now, which is more than we had when we started. But I don't think membership is going to be the metric that we want to use for success. So.
I'll quickly jump in.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead,
Sure.
Stephanie. I was just going to add in, and thank you. I had unmuted while you were chatting, Cindy. It is something that BioISAC engages on. Nothing quite sends the message of what your work is until you're standing in the field with the farmer, showing them the compromising factors of the work that they're doing. And we've worked with everybody from the folks in the United States processing apples from farm to packaging to them ending up at your grocery store, all the way to the very advanced work with drone security and the folks that are, laser beam zapping weeds from crop fields using AI algorithms to determine plant versus weed. All of those have security implications, and all of them operate off of data. And to us, this is an imperative activity, and regional discussions, local, building trust and relationships, and knowing how to act or behave when something is quirky looking or doesn't feel quite right is very important. And it's something that we're partnered with a couple of different groups right now to do across the US. I have a conversation next week with Canada. I was in the UK about 4 weeks ago. Wherever there's a pocket to have these dialogues, we're trying to be there and be in person to first and foremost communicate trust.
So I know that Limor has to leave for her session or get ready for her session, and she had said early that she's got a strong interest in data integrity, but not necessarily in the agricultural space. So I want to just sort of maybe prompt some discussion about the focus of this working group and if it makes sense to limit it to agricultural data, or should it be more general? And I started off the session thinking it should be more general, because it's clearly an issue that affects not just ag data, it's health data, it's lots of other kinds of data. On the other hand, I really like the ability to address these very specific and critical questions having to do with biosecurity and the bioeconomy. So, Limor, do you have any comment? What's your sense?
Yeah, as you were speaking, I'm thinking I'm kind of two minds, because I feel like some issues, some problems cut across all disciplines and are, issues of data integrity. And I was making a little list of some of the things that were brought up. Lack of metadata, incomplete data, lack of harmonization, all kinds of problems that have to do with challenges and inability to verify the quality of the data. So in some sense, it's an issue that is foundational. But in another sense, that's why I'm of two minds. I agree with you, and I could see the value of focusing on this particular issue in this case, because it's complicated. So there is definitely value in the expertise that people bring in who are working on these data specifically. So I don't know, so I'm not giving you really an answer, but I'm just kind of thinking that, and data integrity is something that's been done at RDA and in other organizations, and social sciences, we worry about it a lot, in other places too. So I'm not sure how to conclude my comment, except to say that I think you're doing amazing work and just to keep doing it. But maybe if there are ways to connect to other groups who are thinking about data integrity, that might be a way to have maybe some sort of loose forum about it, or every once in a while a session where that is the top issue and all the groups that are considering this can kind of come together and talk about it from their perspective.
So I had some thoughts on that. So if we're talking about setting up a working group, then we have a very limited time frame and we have to produce something. If it's a working group, I would limit it to an area like agricultural data integrity, with the thought that there might be things coming out of that, and should be things coming out of that that can be transferred to other domains as well. We could do an interest group on data integrity with a specific spin-off working group or a specific task group or whatever you want to call it on agricultural data. I think that's all options, but what personally sounds a bit like too much to chew off for me would be a working group on data integrity in general. I think that is too broad. So I would prefer to either limit it down or start out more broadly and then find areas where we want to drill deeper, if that makes sense.
We didn't hear that other talk that you showed, but looking at the slides, a lot of the challenges that were described to me were a bit broader than just this verification or provenance kind of checking. So I would, for similar reasons, argue that if we focus on ag data and we focus specifically on these challenges to threats of corruption or unknown, provenance, I think that would be totally doable. There's enough there for sure. The other argument is that I think David was talking about their interest in defining something that would be provided along with other metadata for ag data. And so because some of the, well, a lot of the genomic work has more general metadata standards. So if there were something attached to that that had guidance for how you provide enough data quality or provenance or checksum information to be able to check it, it could generalize, but it would also just basically make sure that it is useful for the use cases that this group decides to address.
So, yeah, I was going to say we haven't really heard from anyone in the chat in online for a while, and I can't tell who's even there. So, David,
We're
or
still
anyone
here.
else? Yep.
Yeah. Cindy, on your point, I think that guidance on how much, how many steps do you take? What is the classification of the data in question? How much? I mean, we used to say dual use of concern. Now we would say, other things. I'm going to use dual use of concern for a shorthand. I think that's a really great place to start, because somebody like me, I can sit around and I can create tools for this stuff all day, but where is it actually needed? Where are the hurt points? And where's the best use of our limited resources to get the most out of our buck?
Okay. Anyone else from the online people? Oh, sorry.
My English is bad. It's okay. I think there are a lot of use cases in RAI in France, and I think it's a good idea with work with you because the use case is very a lot of use case in RAI because there are a lot of different data, and yes, I think it's a good idea.
That's great. Given that you're, I think, the main agricultural researcher in this room, at least, that's great validation. Okay. So it sounds like we have something that is worth pursuing. So I don't know, from my perspective, I guess the next thing to do would be to try and describe a bit more clearly what exactly would the scope of this group be, and then what would the name of the group be, and then maybe work towards who should we involve in this, who should we flag this with, who should we try to attract to the group, and then take it from there. So that would be my thinking. Well, we have a bit of time left where we can start to talk about that a little bit. Trish, would you be able, if we have a bit of a discussion about what agriculture data integrity actually means, could you take some notes in the collaborative notes document? That would be great. Wonderful, thank you. So that would be one thing I would like to talk a little bit more about, because I think we all have an idea of what agricultural research data integrity means, and if we put it all together, I think we get a very different animal. So I think we'd have slightly different ideas of what that would mean. So for me, not coming from an agricultural background, a lot of data integrity is not just about the data quality, though that's one thing, but it's also about provenance, so knowing where your data comes from, and also knowing who's actually allowed to access or share or manipulate the data. That is sort of a bit tangential maybe, but I think knowing that your data hasn't been touched by someone who shouldn't have is also a part of that. So I don't know, other people may have completely different ideas.
So this is Cindy, and I think you're on to that. I'm not sure I would include so much the access issues. However, if somebody else has accessed or somebody else has changed something, you would want to know it. And I guess what's in my head is, and when I first talked to David about this idea, I said, well, the Ag Data Commons provides a checksum So they can prove that what was deposited is the same thing that you're now downloading. However, that's not sufficient to prove what happened to it before it was deposited. I mean, we have curators who, work with the depositors, the researchers whose data supposedly is being deposited, but they're not experts. They're not checking the provenance of the data before it gets to the repository. So they're handling that part from the repository afterwards. So I think the scope of this group should also include how do you track it before it gets shared to make sure that there's enough documentation that people can be can trust that what they're getting is what is actually described in the metadata.
May
So
I
one thing,
jump in,
sorry,
Stephanie?
yeah, Whitney.
Sorry, it's just going to be an awkward. Interrupting is like it freaks me out. I'm Canadian. But I wanted to share. We have a couple of publications from the BioISAC community that we hope to have come out in the next couple of months, in advance of our first ever annual meeting at the end of February. One speaks to the classification of data based on its sensitivity and proclivity for misuse. So think about that in terms of personally identifying information, et cetera, versus here's the grow schedule for a bunch of seeds. We're trying to differentiate that, similar to how the national security community prioritizes what should be kept confidential. So we have one publication in that space, which I think might help define some work streams. And then we have another one coming out about this very technical piece around checking your data, provenance, et cetera. We're hoping to include case studies in that piece. I have a feeling it would first come out as a conversation, and then we may, in another stretch of time, be able to provide the case analyses. We have some folks at a series of the US-based national labs who have some data sets that are willing to sort of see what happens when we test them, which I think can be really constructive for this group to look through. As the person looking at all of it, I get very nervous about the implementation and hearing from this community about how it impacts your day to day, and these global conversations around essentially they're starting to treat data as a currency or a good that has import and export restrictions on it. How is that going to impact your work? And how can we give you a safe sort of vehicle for transportation between two markers? It's something that I'm trying to figure out, but it's shifting from a research, open data, let's save the world together, to one of this data is a currency and something that unfortunately some foreign actors are very interested in harvesting. And so it's now being treated in this law enforcement perspective. And I think here is where we can figure out what would work and propose it. And I'm happy to carry that water to the law enforcement bureaus to see where we might get. But the bigger context of this is more than a publication and a solution. It carries some pretty significant concerns.
Thanks, Whitney. We have put your video on the big screen so that we can actually see when you want to say something. So I think that's hopefully a little bit better. So I had a comment on data integrity and perceived data integrity, because I think, the data can be as fantastic as it wants to be, but if people don't see it like that, because you just mentioned the word trust, that just triggered that in me, then that's probably not going to do the job. So there's the fact that it has to be okay, but there's also the fact that it has to be known and perceived as okay. So anyway, that was some thinking I had.
Whitney sparked in my mind the discussions we've been having around a lot of our AI work in USDA, and this is that it really needs to be according to a risk-based framework. And so you don't want to create a lot of burden on the people who really want to share their data. At the same time, you need to know which data sets, which problematic areas need the most attention and the most oversight. So I would just encourage you, put the word risk somewhere in your case statement so that it's clear that it's not about shutting down all research or preventing sharing of data. It's developing those questions that you need to ask to determine, is this safe or not safe to do something?
That makes sense. Any other comments? David, did you want to say something? If not, you don't have to.
No, I've been sort of writing as we've been going here, thinking about, you know, we've touched on a couple of ideas: trust, sensitivity, impact, perception, and risk. I've just been writing about, or writing a word cloud around it, all the comments. I think these are great aspects to you know, something of a beast.
So Stephanie had suggested that we also think about who might need to be recruited into this effort. I'll raise the question about equipment manufacturers, because I know it came up earlier that, you know, a lot of this data is coming off of machines. And so it's going to have potentially some proprietary data format that describes the settings of that machine. And I don't know how those manufacturers feel about having that attached to a shared data set. So it may be worth thinking about bringing at least one example of that into the group so that you could test through those kinds of issues. I mean, obviously in 18 months, you're not gonna solve the whole problem with all the big, you know, John Deeres of the world. But anyway, that would just be a suggestion to try to think about at least one industry partner who would be amenable to being part of that discussion.
So I think apart from working out what exactly the scope is and who the people who we should involve, and that's a great comment, Cindy, we should also start, I guess, working out use cases. So coming up with examples of use cases, and that might help us shape a little bit also how far we want to go. So it might help us draw boundaries around the scope. So if we start with some examples that we think are relevant. So we had a couple of lightning talks today. We can ask Carmen to elaborate a little bit on what she provided. And if you have use cases or know of use cases, that would be a useful thing to do. So we could start collecting those, and that could help us sort of shape the group a little bit more. So if we work out there's a strong interest, for example, let's say in focusing on biosecurity specifically, then that could be a smaller thing to do, but still worthwhile, and still allow us to transfer some of what we learn to others. Whereas if we have a much broader focus, then, you know, if we have use cases from more different areas, then that drives this group a little bit differently, I would think. No, does that make sense? Sort of? Okay.
So we have a start on some use cases because we had some presented here. And in my experience, the success of a group like this really depends on having committed leadership to take the next steps. And so I think Whitney and David have already demonstrated that they're passionate about this and willing to put in that effort. From the community of practice, I can, you know, do my best to spread the word and see if there's others who would like to join up. The people here had some great comments. We haven't heard from everybody online, so I'm not sure if they're, you know, listening and learning or if they actually are interested in getting involved. But yeah, I guess what else do you need me to share? Nothing. Okay.
So basically, I'll try to go back to the slides if I can. So we had a couple of things that we wanted to just talk about at the end as a wrap up. So, So basically, we had a few questions there. So first of all, is this a topic that's of interest? And it seems to be, so that's good. Should this be pursued as an RDA working group? So it sounds like that's something we could do. We've already talked a little bit about who would be interested in helping us progress this. And if you have any pointers or any ideas, so please put them in the collaborative notes. That would be really helpful. What organizations, groups, and communities should be involved? We've already touched on that. Who would like to be involved in driving the group? That's definitely coming back to your comment, Cindy. And just from an RDA perspective, at the moment we have strong leadership from David and Whitney, but as an RDA group, we need a more global coverage. So finding people who want to drive this from Europe, from Africa, from South America, from Australia, from Asia would be good. We're not going to get from everywhere, I don't think, but it would we definitely need at least 2 regions represented. So again, if you are interested, please let us know. Put your name down in the notes with a comment, and we'd happily get in touch. Yes, I think, Cindy, we should work out something to send to the community of practice at some point. So that's the first piece of work that we can do, just a little brief on the group, what we're trying to do and what people can do to help and what we hope to get out of it. So just to wrap up, after the session, so if you haven't done so already, it would be great if you could put your name, details, and any further comments that you'd like to the collaborative notes. My understanding is the recording of this will be made available to everyone who's a participant in the next day or two, depending on how much drama we're going to have with other things. And to the general public, I think something around before Christmas or around Christmas, but I don't know, that Trish might know. And yeah, feel free to contact us either on Hoover or email. Our addresses are hopefully in the collaborative notes. If not, then I'll ask the conveners to put their names there. And if you have any questions or suggestions or anything like that, we would love to hear from you. So that's basically it from me. David or Whitney, would you like to say anything else?
Thank you for being a wonderful host and pulling this together, Stephanie. I appreciate you.
That's all right. Thanks to the tech team for sorting out all the problems. Thanks to everyone here, thanks to the speakers, and thanks to the participants. So thank you very much for coming along.